it didn't do the thing. It didn't do the thing this time.
What is it, like 2.5 years later?
Yeah, exactly.
Finally.
Every time we start the show using this laptop, it will show this screen, like the actual show screen, and then fade in to the show screen. It does this really weird glitch. But it's kind of been this running thing that, like, every single time we've done the show for 2 years now, it's done that. And for once, it didn't. So it's nice. We have the Missing Enigma again, guys. Welcome back, my friend. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
glad
Thank you for showing up as well.
Yeah, sorry for last time, huh?
Yeah, right.
Right. Maybe that's what I was meant subconsciously.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, boy. So, last time we were talking about Skinwalker Ranch and UFOs and just some of this, generalized, more of the paranormal nonsense. A lot of that typically has to do in America, where you've got all of these stories of UFOs starting to show up after World War II. But of course, America's not the only place that has UFO sightings, UFO stories. Russia has a good number of its own, and back in the 1950s, a very weird thing happened to a group of hikers, and UFOs and aliens were one of the leading conspiracy theories regarding it for a very long time. How do 9 Russian hikers randomly all die in the forest with seemingly no solid explanation for all of it? And of course, in more recent years, it's been, it was an avalanche and all of that. Of course, we're talking about Dyatlov Pass, and explanations for that ranged from a Yeti to UFOs, missile tests, hostile natives, anything under the sun. In fact, I think I remember there were some like 75 possibilities that the Russian government looked into in 2019, and they came up with avalanche, which was honestly one of the least likely of the possibilities, but it was also the one that required them doing the least work, and they could just say it was an avalanche. So obviously a lot of people were placated by that and said, oh, okay, avalanche, sure. They used Disney magic. Clearly, it must be true. For a solid group of people, myself included, that did not sit right. And I will say that the reason it didn't sit right definitely was originally different, but even after doing a 2-part video on Dyatlov Pass, I still don't love the avalanche theory. So I want to start this off by asking one simple question. What do you think of the avalanche theory?
I'm kind of, with all the theories, it's been kind of like they don't perfectly fit in any way. All of the theories. There's something that's left, like, there's always questions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the avalanche theory, the slab avalanche or whatever they called it, because, and I watched your video and I agree. At least I watched the second part of it. But
the second part was really the part that I think matters, because that's where I went into the
I figured the first part was like the who, what, where,
exactly,
when, kind of. Okay. Well, the second part, I agree with you. I think you said something about you think it explains the first part of what happened to them, but it definitely doesn't explain the second.
Yeah.
It explains why they might have gotten out of the tent, but everything out, a lot of weird stuff was discovered that doesn't explain the avalanche stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm not really on board with that theory. It doesn't go far enough.
Right.
So
and I think there may be people watching who are unfamiliar with the Dyatlov Pass incident, and I realize that. I kind of wanted to start it with that little bit so everybody understands where the weirdness comes in. Because the story of Dyatlov Pass, to give the simple explanation, is 9 or 10. It was originally 10 and it went down to 9, if I remember correctly. Yeah. 9 Russian hikers, originally 10, set off for a hiking trip. The purpose of the hiking trip is, in fact, to get certification that they are capable of leading a hiking trip like this. It was a class 3 trek, I believe, in Russian, like Soviet terminology, which is not the same as it is today. And the thing was, everything goes relatively smoothly for these guys until they get to the side of this peak. And for some reason, the Russian name for it is escaping me right now, but it's Peak 1079 is the topographical listing for it. When they get there, they pitch their tent on a slope, they spend the night, and at some point after they pitch the tent, and 7 of the 9 of them had undressed, it seems. They all panicked, cut the tent open from the inside, and then, despite the fact that they panicked to get out of the tent and sliced it open, seem to have presented an orderly retreat down the slope of the mountain, got into a tree, started a fire, and then left that tree. But 2 people died at the tree, and then they split into 2 groups. One group of 4 and one group of 3. One group of 3 goes up trying to get back to the tent. They die because they all freeze to death. Then on the alternative side, you have 4 people go down into a creek, and they construct a very makeshift shelter, but then somehow decide to leave the shelter and end up falling, as far as the Russian government was concerned, into a creek and dying, despite the fact that the injuries that a couple of them sustained falling a meter or 2 were comparable to being hit by a car. 70 years later, I want to say, the Russian government comes back and says, all right, you know what? This was weird. We're going to investigate. They spend a few months investigating and determine it was an avalanche that caused them to leave the tent, and they all just froze to death. Obviously, there are a lot of people that don't like that explanation, and the reason really does come down to those injuries that they sustained. Leaving the tent makes sense. That part can be explained by slab avalanche, katabatic winds. There were a few other explanations that we went over in the video that I can't recall off the top of my head.
Considering we've talked about the avalanche a number of times in the videos so far, and I feel like using the word avalanche may be somewhat confusing for those who aren't specifically familiar with this, because the slab avalanche is a lot different than what most people think of as an avalanche.
Yeah.
Do we want to explain a little bit about
Sure.
what that is?
Do you want to take that one?
I mean, I'm not super familiar with it myself.
Yeah.
I believe it's just a slab, because that mountain isn't real steep,
No.
right?
It was
And
like a
so-
30-degree slope.
Right. It's kind of like a big hill.
Yeah.
And isn't it just like a slab of the mountains rolling off of it, basically?
And it wasn't even that big, right? It was
Mhm.
it was almost more like a wind drift
Yeah.
piled up and then fell on top of it, which they
Yeah, it was
accounted for
basically
being a slab
because
avalanche.
they took shovels and dug out some of the snow. Some of it piled up, and then it got to a point where it was too heavy, and a sheet of it would have just slid over the tent.
But then the tent doesn't look.
The tent does not look like it was covered by an avalanche
Yeah.
at all. If you look at the pictures, and that's part of the frustrating thing, is I'm sure you came across this as well. The people who documented it initially, who found everything, were not professionals. They were student and professor volunteers who went out to look for their friends, basically.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure you noticed that when you looked through it, like you are very good at looking through the official documents compared to us.
I didn't spend a whole lot. I
okay.
haven't done a video on this like you guys, so I'm
All right.
sure I'm a little bit behind. But
Sure, yeah.
I did some cursory research here.
Yeah. So when you come across it, and I'm sure you'll find this, that it's not like they don't go and photograph square by square. Here's what's here, and here's what's here, and here's what's here, and here's all the footprints. And it's, I like to look at it like an archaeological dig a lot of the time. Like, where's all the evidence and how does it stratify? They took a lot of pictures, but nothing that really gives you a good understanding of where everything was. So people over the last 70 years have kind of pieced it together. Okay, well, this picture appears to show this, which means that at this angle, they would have seen, things in this way. I think that something did happen on that slope, on that mountain. I don't necessarily know what drove them from the tent. I like the katabatic winds theory. Do you know what that one is?
Yeah, I heard about it. It's just like strong, vicious winds pelting them almost.
Basically, the way it works is when wind will cascade over the ridge, over the top of the mountain, it will come down much faster. So it will feel like you're in a wind tunnel for a second there, and people will kind of panic. And one suggestion was the reason that the tent has snow on it, despite the fact that avalanches are never reported in that area, was that there was katabatic wind, and they got out of the tent to get away from the winds because they were dangerous, and covered the tent in snow so that it would stay put, and then went down the mountain and tried to get back up to the tent afterwards, realizing that the winds were probably over and it was safe. So, I mean, I guess here's what I would want to ask you to kind of start and get an idea where you are on this. What was the story as you came across it for the first time?
Oh my gosh, the first time? I think it was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was like I was more into believing the paranormal side of things.
Yeah.
So I would imagine the first time I heard it, I was probably like fully down with the UFO or Yeti
Yeah.
scenario or something. Um, I've got a completely different perspective on it now. I mean,
Yeah. So how did it change for you?
well, I think over time, as you gain more knowledge of, especially things you thought were paranormal, and you keep finding out how unparanormal they are,
Yeah.
you kind of get more skeptical in your old age, I
It does
guess.
kind of take the wonder out of
Um,
the world.
it does. I know. Don't you just hate being the killer of fun? Like,
Especially considering I used to be the one who was getting the fun killed. Like, I don't know if you ever went through a period where you had somebody who was, who was a little bit more skeptical, more level-headed,
oh yeah,
who would
yeah.
respond to your videos or something and be like, no, absolutely not. Here's the truth. But yeah, I mean, so it was the same for me when I first heard it. I forget who I first heard the story from, but it was along those lines of like, man, this is really weird. It kind of has to be paranormal, There's no explanation for what happened here. And it does start to pile up, but for me, I think the moment where I went, no, this was not paranormal, was when I really looked at the positions of the bodies. And I don't know, that was what it was for me, was hang on a second. These people died of, they did freeze to death, but why did they freeze to death? Like, and how'd they freeze to death so suddenly? Because it's very obvious that is the cause of death, is hypothermia.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I was like, yeah, so it wasn't paranormal, but it also wasn't that they just kind of casually froze to death. So I guess what for you was like, was there a moment for this specific case where it clicked and you were like, I don't think that this is a Yeti or a UFO. I think it was some other sort of nonsense. Or was it just kind of gradual?
I think graduate, because I mean, I think at least for like the last 3 years, I remember seeing headlines like at least once a year about like a new theory coming out, like Dyatlov Pass solved, by just multiple people. Ever since the internet's really blown up, especially on YouTube and people making lots of videos about it. I think every time someone makes a video about it, it gets a little more refined in terms of the information that comes out about it. And now I would hope most of the videos that come out have gotten refined to a point where we don't need to talk about the Yeti being involved.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you want to talk UFOs, you can, but I mean, there's not much evidence to support that, as opposed to, I don't know, something a little more rational or, but I think gradually, because I never really spent a lot of much time of my own looking into it or reading the files, which are pretty available now.
Yeah, there's a great website. It was like Dyatlov Pass. Yeah, I think it was dyatlovpass.com, right?
Yeah.
That has it's
a lot of information. Yeah.
Maps, documents. It's got both the original scanned copy and the English translation. Awesome resource if you ever decide to do your own look at it. Which, in my opinion, when it comes to this stuff, a lot of people will say, oh, well, this person already covered it, so I shouldn't. We're all of us in this community have different strengths and weaknesses. So when we each go over something, I've noticed that, you'll catch something that we miss, and Swamp Dweller will catch something that you missed, and Mr. Bullen will catch something that somebody else missed. Like, it's just, it compounds, until you've got, somebody will make the video that goes really viral, and then it's just peer review.
Right. No, it's a really good thing. Like,
yeah,
it's, if you disagree with me on any one of my videos, I appreciate you, saying that, because one of the worst things, say, about missing 411 for a long time was that everyone used to say, you shouldn't talk about this because this is somehow like David Paulides' copyrighted content. But then nothing's ever going to get done in terms of refining that case and trying to find a solution. Everyone needs to talk about these cases and present their opinion on whatever it is. It doesn't have to be missing people. It can be anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But the goal is to try and, refine stuff and get better information every time. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm happy when anyone, points something out that because all the, sometimes when you're reading through hundreds of pages of stuff, you miss things or you mess up. Like, happens to me all the time on little things. I try to watch for it the best I can and learn from my mistakes, but like you said, different strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes you miss something, sometimes you don't. So I think this case has just gotten refined over time, and I'd say your video is probably the top of the list right now in terms of what someone should watch if they want to like get the grand scope of this thing,
Well, thank you.
because it's not solved by any
No.
means. It's still completely unexplained.
Yeah, so that was what I wanted to ask next was, we kind of ended that video with a rare moment of I have no idea what happened here. I personally do have like some very nebulous ideas that I'd like to explore further, which is why we kind of left it open that we would release a unified version with an additional part to it later down the road once I had more time. But after I mean watching ours and knowing maybe anything else that you might know about it, is there anything that kind of comes to the front for you in terms of, first of all, what pushed them out of the tent, and then also what may have happened? I'm just curious if you have ideas.
I could throw a few of them at you. I mean, for some reason, I keep coming back to this thought that like what injured them, it feels like they got hit by like a concussive blast almost,
Mm-hmm.
and the cutting of the tent, with 9 people packed together in a tent, if something hits them and with a moment of panic or whatever, I could see them maybe wanting to just slice their way out or whatever. I don't know, certain little things stood out to me where I like might find an explanation for it, like the burns on the, I'm not going to get anybody's names, just talking about this, by the way.
That's fine.
The 2 fellows who died by the tree,
Krivonashenko and Doroshenko.
The 2 Shenkos.
Yeah. I think that's who that was.
They had burns on themselves, and they I could see them, getting those from getting too close to the fire while they were getting cold, rather than anything else. Because I've heard of that happening to a lot of people. You're freezing, you get close to the fire, you burn yourself because you can't, you're just so cold. I thought it was interesting that of the 4 people that were in the den, 3 of them had such severe injuries as to basically immobilize them, and one was actually all right.
Yeah, one of them was basically entirely unhurt. I think that was it started the K. Klevetov.
Yes.
Klevetov had minor injuries and is believed to have been the last of them to die.
Right, and I would believe that. It seemed like he was there as kind of a caretaker, and what I just wonder is, when did those 3 people get that injury, and were they moving them around during this time trying to take care of them? Maybe that's why they built up the fire. Maybe they were immobilized and the other 2 guys gathered wood. I'm sure more people gathered wood. I mean, looking at the pictures, it's an interesting thing because so many things just don't make sense.
Well, also there was a lot of that they had knives and axes, and they must have used knives to cut I think they suggested they used knives to cut the branches that they used to form the den, but they didn't find the knife. There was no knife there. I think 2 or 3 of the knives were actually still back up in the tent. So the question was, did somebody actually make it back up to the tent at some point? And if so, how and why and when? But yeah, what you said about their injuries, that was probably the first thing that stuck out, because there were people that were like, oh, well, they got the injuries from the avalanche. Those injuries did not come from the avalanche, and then those people walked down that mountain. If they had sustained those injuries at the tent, they would not have left the tent. So those injuries, in my opinion, happened after they left the cedar tree. Because that's where the fire is they go, there's basically the 4 main locations here are the tent, the cedar tree, the way back to the tent is where 3 of them die, and then the den itself. And the other thing is, I was under the impression, and maybe you were as well, that they died in the den. That their bodies were found in the den they constructed. But they weren't. They were found several meters away in the creek, and then a couple meters down. And one thing that somebody said was, oh, well, you could die from, people have died from falling 6 feet. Like, yeah, people have died from falling 6 feet if they hit their head or land in a very specific way that causes a heart attack.
Or like neck break.
Or their neck breaks or something. But the injuries they sustained, I have never in my life heard of someone having an entirely crushed chest cavity from falling 6 feet. Like, even onto stone.
I mean, I don't think they got the injuries from falling into the creek. The impression I get when I look at it is that they already had these injuries that were immobilizing injuries. And then if they fell into the creek, then you're done for, because the cold water, you're not going to be able to change in anything, and once your clothes are wet, I mean, you're toast at that point. And the way some of the bodies were positioned, especially the one who I think it might have been one of the women.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not
was
sure. That was
Was it Dubonina?
kind of on like
that.
a,
Yeah, I
a
think that was
small
Dubonina.
falls there. Yeah.
Yeah, she was
That
like kind
positioning
of
is
like
very
over
weird.
a rock like this. Yeah.
The only thing I
That
can,
is a very weird positioning.
the only thing I can think of, and remind me, it was later on in the search, like it was later in the spring that they found them by the creek,
Yeah,
right?
May. So they found Krivonashenko and Doroshenko first, and then they found Dyatlov, the other woman, Kolmogorova,
Yep.
and Slobodin.
Mhm.
They found them on the way back up. It looked like they died trying to get back to the tent. And then, so that was late February and early March that they found all of them. And then the others were found, I want to say May 5th, because there was ice starting to
sounds right.
melt.
Do we
Yeah.
think that there may have been the cause of their injuries may have been due to a partial collapse of the den that they were in, and that came on top of them, and they weren't discovered until after things started melting, which kind of destroyed that evidence?
So that was one of the suggestions. The problem was that they were found too far from the den.
Got it.
I mean, here's the fact of the matter. I don't think. I remember Dubonina, it was said, would have died within like 20 minutes of sustaining those injuries. So she likely was not carried to that location, which means she likely died in that location, which means she likely received the injuries in that location. Occam's razor, if she received the injuries in that location, then so did the other two, who died of their wounds. Kolevatov, I don't recall there being a real explanation for how he died aside from freezing.
Yeah.
He didn't have a
Right,
major injury, unlike most of the rest of them.
Right. And yet he was in the creek cradling a body, right?
Yeah, he was. It looked as though he was trying to keep the oldest of them, which was
Was that
God, who was that? It was
the guy that started with a Z, right?
Zolotar?
yeah, Zolotaryov.
Zolotar.
Yes.
Yeah, he.
Which is weird because if you're in the creek cradling, that is like the most counterintuitive thing
Yeah.
ever.
Well, of course, the question is, was the creek even a creek at that point, or was it a ravine filled
That's
with
true.
snow? Which it probably was a ravine filled with snow, considering the temperatures were what they were. You know, I wonder if those four, the way they died, was completely disconnected from the way the others did. Yeah, it does occur to me, like, what did they try to leave their den because they were looking for something? Yeah, I think that is one thing that I did not consider when actually making the video, was what if they did not die that night? We actually don't know. What if what happened with them was in the morning they tried to go down and, you know, something else happened to them. But I think with the biggest question with all of it, for me, really comes down to what killed Zolotaryov and Dubonina. Because Thibaut Bernal
and one other one, right?
So Thibaut
There's
Bernal,
three were
yeah,
like...
he was the other one that died of an injury in the creek, but his was a head injury, which means that he actually could have been carried. He could have survived, because he would have been extraordinarily concussed, unable to talk, but they could have still carried his body. Whether or not they did is certainly up for debate. But that's why I'm saying, like, it is possible that maybe they were trying to leave at that point, trying to get down the hill. But no, I think that if you can figure out what it was that caused the injury to those two, then I think you probably solve the mystery here, because basically everything else can be explained as hypothermia, but their injuries cannot. And I think that's where the sticking point is. And with this specific story, as I'm sure you've noticed, most of the people who know about it kind of have the idea that all of this happened within like a 50 square meter area. And it didn't. It happened over like, I think, half a kilometer. Like across half a kilometer, something like that.
Between the tent and the wood line?
Between the tent and the cedar tree, I think is like a kilometer.
Because I read somewhere that the den from the den to the cedar was very
not
short.
That was like 75 meters.
Speaking distance almost.
Yeah.
Is what someone said. I read.
Somebody said that it was possible that they could have talked to each other from the cedar tree down to the den. But then the question was, why would you split up? Because one of the things you're going to want to do is cuddle. You want to snuggle for the warmth, you know? Penguins do it.
Oh yeah.
My football team did it when I was a freshman in high school. Yeah.
What? But like
Hey,
during
it works.
practice?
Oh, during a practice when it was cold and rainy, we like huddled like penguins.
I mean, yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Cumulatively,
Fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very touching moment.
quite literally.
Yeah, that's true.
We're all that close together.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. It's such a weird incident. And the Russian government was so cagey about it. I don't know if you've looked at their exact initial response, but it took them weeks to agree to look for these people, to send them out. I think they realized they were missing something like March 12th or February 12th. And nobody did anything. I think Khrushchev got the memo about it like 2 weeks after they had gone missing, and then the students had already found them by the time they had decided they were going to send people out to look. So the Russian government was really slow to respond, which on the one hand could be because it was communist Russia, but and there's just a lot of bureaucracy and it was all very stupid. But on the other hand, they kind of buried it after. They could only bury it so much, obviously, because the families found out. But they kind of buried everything and tried to say, you know what, something happened. It was weird, but we have no real further explanation. So everyone move along, which is why I kind of I come along to agree with you on the idea that maybe it was a concussive blast, that maybe this was a weapons test. The nuclear radiation, of course, led a lot of people to think maybe they were testing nuclear weapons nearby, but that was probably the result of, you know, two of them working in nuclear science. Although it was kind of weird how much radiation was on the one. There is it gets buried a little bit because it's like, oh, well, it was only slightly over the background radiation levels, but it was before being washed. These garments sat in a creek for 5 months, having water run over them, basically washing them of some of the radioactive material. But Doroshenko or Krivonischenko, one of them, I think, still had an article of clothing on that was radioactive, that was a little too radioactive. Like, kind of had to have been irradiated rather recently. But it wasn't enough to say that there would have, like, all of them would have had it. That's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
What was weird was that one garment was oddly radioactive, but all of their garments should have been oddly radioactive if it happened there.
Right.
And then the question would be, if the radioactive garment was brought with them, how did nobody realize it was that radioactive? It wasn't the dangerous kind of radiation, from what I remember, but it was like, that it would have set off a Geiger counter. So how did nobody check that? How did nobody catch that?
Well, you know,
that might have been part of it.
I mean, this is Russia too. You know, we're talking. I mean, in terms of safety standards. I mean, Chernobyl. Like, you know, I don't know. It's
this is 20 years before Chernobyl.
Exactly.
30 years before Chernobyl.
You know, I could imagine things being a little lax. I don't know.
That's true. That's a good point. It really could have just snuck by them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, the radiation thing. I remember I used to think that was the key, because they used to say that, like, they dug up that body and it was orange looking, so that, you know, it must have been an irradiated body or something. Do you remember that? Did you do any research about that? Yeah. But that's not correct. From my that the body got mummified by the winds is what they say instead. But anyway, but what you just said about
weirdness.
Yeah, there should have been radiation on everything.
Yeah,
and you know, now since there's not, I mean, I still think there's weapons. I just don't think there was nuclear weapons. I lean towards that theory.
Yeah. But the other question that I have with the concussive blast, if this was traditional munitions, traditional ballistics, and explosives, why did only 2 of them have catastrophic injuries to their chests? Were the others dead already? And if so, why'd they die? You know, what? And I think that really is what's so interesting about this, is whatever caused them to leave the tent is not what killed them. Whatever caused them to leave the tent is not what caused those chest injuries. So whatever caused them to leave the tent, yeah, interesting, rather important probably, but not what killed them, and therefore not really relevant to the story.
Well, what would you think if they heard an explosion nearby? Would they leave the tent?
So that might freak you out enough to cut it open, but then why would they proceed downhill in the manner they did?
Well, I don't. It depends on the munition. If you're getting shelled or something, I could see
Yeah.
you wanting to go to a wood
That's
line
true.
because the trees would offer some. They would feel more protected
Yeah.
than being out in the open.
I think whatever caused them to leave had them disoriented. That is the one thing that I think is for sure, because they went towards the tree line, but the way they left the tent, they could have easily gone south or north. So something must have been blocking the south, or they must have thought they were going south, because their cache of all of their supplies was a kilometer south of them. And somehow they ended up going northeast and not being anywhere near it. And then there's evidence that at least two of them climbed as, I think it was up to, 25 meters?
Up into the tree.
Up into the tree?
Yeah.
Like, really high in the tree. And found, why? What purpose could that possibly serve for only a couple of them to do that? It's also probably the two who died. So I think they were looking for the tent. I think they got disoriented leaving the tent, thought they were going to the cache, and then realized they were not in the right place and were looking to see if they could find it. Because that's the only reason that you wouldn't go.
Cache?
It was a kilometer to their southeast, I want to say.
Okay, so
downhill towards the tree line, just in the other direction. I think that makes the most sense, and it also answers the question of why didn't they seek to build their shelter further into the trees? It's because the trees were never the plan. The cache was the plan. So they were trying to find the cache, or they were trying to find the tent, in my opinion. Which means I think they may not have known where they were, and they may have thought the entire time that, in fact, they were south. And that may have been driving their decision-making.
Well, one question that I kind of had, I don't know, maybe you know the answer to it, is that in addition to finding like a lack of knives, there was also like a lack of any light sources.
Yeah.
From anything and if you're running around in the dark trying to find anything, I mean, how are they supposed to do that?
Yeah.
And I believe they actually found a flashlight at the tent sitting on top of all the snow there, which is interesting because if you left that on, you might be able to see it.
Mm-hmm. I think that was the idea. Was like they thought that was to mark the location of the tent. You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But running around in the dark, I mean, the fire would be their only source of light. It seemed like.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a big part of it, and something that people don't really. You have to get so deep into the research to even come to the realization that they had a cache, let alone that the cache was only a kilometer away and in the exact opposite direction. That I can understand why that usually doesn't come up, but it changes the entire narrative, in my opinion. If it goes from they were running off into the woods away from something, not really, what was it? Who knows? It changes it from they left the tent with no intention of going back, or they left the tent in a panic, to they left the tent and went to go get their supplies, probably with the intention of returning to the tent. Which means that whatever drove them from the tent was probably not a monster, was probably not something that they were frightened would still be there. It was probably something that they felt they could overcome. So either maybe the tent did in fact get covered with snow by the wind. It doesn't necessarily have to be that a slab avalanche fell on them. It could be that snow did in fact fall onto them from katabatic winds, just pushing snowdrift. And they thought it was a slab avalanche, cut their way out of the tent, decided they were going to try and get further downhill to their own cache, where all of their food and their supplies and extra sleeping bags and all sorts of things were. Failed to do that because they accidentally went northeast. So that can explain kind of the unreasonability of where they ended up after leaving the tent, but it does not explain how they died. I also wonder, we've talked a lot about the den group and about the two at the tree. Did anything stick out to you about Dyatlov, Slobodin, and Kolmogorova?
Yeah, I found the lividity in the bodies was kind of interesting, signifying that they'd been moved. The two Shankos, I could understand why that was the case for them
Mhm.
because they were probably moved around a bit
Yeah.
by the others.
Because
But
they were
the other
stripped.
three that made
Their clothes were taken
right,
off of them.
exactly. The other three who made their way to the tent, um, assuming they all died one after
Mhm.
the other in their effort to reach the tent. I mean, the only person that would still be alive to go and move them if
Mhm.
they were the only ones in the area would be the
Kolmogorova.
Kulatet. Oh, okay, yeah.
So
The one guy at the
yeah.
den who was still doing
Oh, I see what
well.
you're saying. Yeah, so
And he
Kolevatov
might have
was
like gone to check on them or something,
yeah.
found the bodies because I don't know if he would have moved them or put them in a kind of
Mhm.
I don't know. But I thought it was interesting that they were moved and their injuries, some of them,
Yeah.
um,
I
maybe explainable. I don't know.
yeah. I thought the lividity, I'm glad you mentioned it because that was one of the ones that stuck out to me as well. And I am so unacquainted with medical examinations that
Oh,
I did have to kind of look into it, be like, what does this mean? But I eventually came across, and essentially what it is that blood and bodily fluids pool, wherever at the bottom of the body after death. So
yeah.
if you're on your back, you'll have blood spots on your back. If you're on your stomach, you'll have blood spots on your stomach. What happened was they would find one of these people on their back with the livor mortis spots on their front, which meant that the person had been laying dead on their front for a while. So yeah, that stuck out to me as well. And Kolevatov being the only one who was seemingly still alive at the end here, this means either, and there was one possibility that I guess I didn't consider, or I did consider it, but I thought it was kind of odd, was that they went up as a group, and the four who went to the den are the ones who decided we're not making it to the tent. Like, everybody else died, we have to go back down. One possibility, I didn't love it, because it made more sense that they would split up rather than that all of them would try to go to the tent, because that was basically an all or nothing play, whereas if they split up, they had better chance of surviving because you had two small groups. I wonder, and the other thing that stuck out to me, I guess, with this was, why would Kolevatov, if it was him, go up, move the bodies, but not take any of their clothes? Kolmogorova also doesn't appear to have taken any of their clothes, and it's unlikely that she would have stayed behind very long to move Dyatlov or Slobodin's bodies, or that she could have gone back to them. I don't think she had the spots either, oddly enough. So whoever moved them, it was not Kolmogorova, and it probably wasn't anyone at the den, and if it was anyone at the den, it was Kolevatov. But why? And that really is the thing here, is just every time you explain something, there's more questions.
I wonder, because if Kolevatov went up there to check on the bodies and found them frozen and dead, he might not take the time to remove their clothes because they already had a lot of clothes at the den that they weren't even using.
True, yeah.
And I mean, like I said, he's the only one. I just got the impression that the ones at the den, the three were too injured to even make an attempt to go up to the tent.
Yeah.
Kolevatov was the one who stayed as caretaker. The other three went for it.
So you think that it may have been that they all went to the den and then sent three up?
I kind of, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely, I hadn't considered that. It would make a little bit of sense that they would all work on the den together and then maybe send the three strongest.
Yeah, because I don't think Kolevatov could have built that on his own, and I don't think he had the help of the injured three if they were already injured.
Yeah.
Because it takes, we don't even really know how they would have built that in the first place without the tools. And if they were using like their hands, he couldn't have definitely not done that alone. So I don't know. It was a thought I had about it.
Yeah. It also does, it's predicated upon whether or not they were injured already.
Right.
And I think that's, I wish that there were a way to just get some of these details, because if you can at least get a chronology of who was injured when,
yeah, that would
you
be
can
very
start
helpful
to piece it together more. And I mean, it was my opinion that they probably split off at the cedar tree just because of the directions that the footprints go, but it would be entirely possible they might have gone up to the cedar tree first, knowing it as a landmark, and then kind of doubled back around to go up to the tent.
Well, I think they must have found at some point that the fire was unsustainable, especially if those two guys died from exhaustion. I don't know if they did or not.
The burns,
the Shankos.
Yeah, the burn marks on the logs suggested that I think it had burned for about 90 minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to stay pretty active to keep a fire alive in the snow sometimes, getting the
Hmm.
firewood and stuff, especially stuff that will burn. I mean, they're lucky they got something going at all in some ways.
Yeah, it
But I
was
mean, it's
weird how like I mean the fact they were even able to get green wood covered in wet snow to burn is wild to me.
well, it's you know, if you look at the photos, there are so many other smaller
Hmm.
sticks and stuff that are very close to the ground that you don't need to climb a
No,
tree to
you
just you
don't.
could just snap them and break them
Yeah,
very easily. It's probably seasoned wood too that's been sitting on the ground for a while out
exactly.
of the snow. You know, if you look at the pictures, you see a lot of this stuff.
Hmm.
And so it seemed totally unnecessary to actually have to climb up the
Hmm.
tree, especially very high,
And yet
and start.
all of the official reporting says they climbed the tree to get firewood.
It's yeah, it's very odd, and I don't know if they were just trying to gather anything they could within the firelight
Yeah,
that they could see, and eventually decided it was a good idea to start
yeah,
getting stuff off the because I believe they only collected wood off the side of the tree that had the fire on it,
yeah,
right? So it
yeah.
would have been within like the firelight, but
Hmm.
at the same time, that's quite a mission to undertake.
Hmm. And I mean, it's it does explain the exhaustion if those are the two that climbed the tree.
It sure
Like,
does, yeah.
if they did die of exhaustion, that explains why. I do wonder, like, if you look at the Russian government's explanation for this, it can't have possibly made sense to them. There is no way that the government officials who were in charge of this looked at the explanation and went, "Yeah, they have to know. They have to know."
I mean, I would not be shocked given the fact that this was deep
Yeah.
Soviet Russia,
Well,
that
Yeah.
their prime motivation
mhm,
was solve the case. Don't like,
yeah,
get it done fast, more so than correct.
yeah, and did if they did cover something up, why? I guess is the other question that I have. What reason would you have aside from not wanting to say we accidentally killed 9 of our own civilians, which is not something the Russians typically had problems with back in
No.
those times. But I wonder, obviously with the current Russian government is not the Soviet government. If they come out and they say, yeah, the Soviets, they were just testing weapons on the side of the mountain and it went wrong. That's not their fault. So in order for them to release that report today and say it was just an avalanche means that either they really don't know, which is possible because I think we have this tendency to assume that when the government gets something wrong or says something that's incorrect and we all know it, that they're in fact being deceptive and that the government is full of sneaky tricksters who are trying to run the world in secret. I think there's also the very real possibility that these people are morons, and that needs to be considered. So, there is the possibility that the people who did the investigation for the Russian government are idiots, or that the current Russian government has a valid reason to still keep this a secret if they do know what happened. So the conspiracy brain for me is like, what if this is a little bit more complicated than simple traditional munitions or nuclear weapons? What if they were testing something that was a sonic weapon or some kind of energy weapon that, like making a shockwave without the conventional explosion? Like, I wonder if there was anything along those lines, that it was some sort of more secretive tech that got involved here. But then again, there's also the possibility that these people were just not smart.
I can understand where you're coming from though, because in terms of thinking about some sort of conventional weapon testing, my biggest question from that is always going to be, were they in such a place that anyone in the surrounding territories would have heard explosions happening? Because I don't remember ever hearing anything about that.
So yeah, that is kind of the thing, is and why I said, maybe something that they were testing that produces kinetic
Right.
energy without the explosion,
Yeah.
because there were Monsi hunters and villages out in the general area, with not like right next door, but only a few kilometers away. And if something explodes on the side of the mountain, they're probably going to hear it. So if it was something like that, they probably would have known. They probably would have said something like, hey, we heard a loud boom, but I found nothing about that. And the other thing with the Monsi that I found interesting was their name for the mountain is something along, I think it's Silent Peak in their language. And the Russian name for the mountain is the Russian translation of Silent Peak. It's not called Silent Peak for paranormal reasons. It's called Silent Peak because there are no animals there. And that's clearly odd because they named a mountain after it. But that, I guess, would also be something to factor in, is why do animals avoid that mountain? Doesn't necessarily have to be supernatural, but it could be that there are weirdly intense winds that come over it sometimes. It could be something like that. There's no human tradition about why the mountain is dangerous. It's just that the mountain is not a place that they go to hunt because there's nothing to hunt there. And I think it's valid to ask the question, why wouldn't animals be there? I mean, do you have any thoughts? Like, you know, is there, I guess, what are your thoughts on, well, why no animals?
Well, I mean, looking at the mountain, it's just kind of like a big bald mountain where, I mean, I don't know, if you're an animal, the only reason I could see you being in the area would be to like pass through or something, you know. I don't know if there's much to scavenge or forage in that area. I mean, you know, Russia itself, in terms of hunting and stuff, I mean, I'm not super familiar with it, but, you know, I would imagine they try to stick to areas where they can get sustenance of some sort. And I don't know if that mountain would be a very ideal place for any number of reasons.
Yeah. It's, and so, oh, God. This one drives me insane. This is like one of those things when people are like, if you could go back in time, where would you go? This is on the list because I would simply like to watch and just be like, all right, what exactly did happen here? Somebody did bring something up.
Horror.
Yeah, somebody did bring something up in the chat, which was the lights in the sky that were reported, which is one that I saw. But part of the issue I had with including it and with using it was that it's kind of hearsay, and I don't know. For us, we usually will include hearsay only when it seems plausible and like there's other evidence that kind of goes along with it. Like, okay, yeah. So for example, we just did the Donner Party. A lot of people said that Louis Keseberg, you know, wanted to eat those people. The evidence suggests that Louis Keseberg wanted to eat those people. So the hearsay is something that in that case you can, you know, when he was found, unless I read this very wrong, when his camp was found, George Donner's body that he had been consuming was like 6 feet from 3/4 of an ox. And he was eating the human instead of the ox. So in those cases, when people are like, oh yeah, Louis Keseberg was trying to eat people the whole time, he jumped at his chance. That kind of hearsay I'll take and be like, okay, yeah, based on the other available evidence, sure. In this case, it's just people saying they saw some orange lights in the sky. And there's no picture. There is a picture. I think this is where the issue comes in. Do you know the picture I'm talking about?
But yeah, I've also heard that is not a picture of the lights.
That's the thing. Is one suggestion is it's a picture of the sky. The other is that it's basically just that, you know, I think it was like a picture was taken while the lens cap was still partially on, or some sort of weird photographic anomaly. It was not a picture of the sky. But then the one thing connected to the camera that probably should be brought up, and I didn't bring it up in the video, or I think I did, but I basically said I didn't have enough time to look into this. Zolotaryov had a camera with him when they found him. And if you read the official documentation, I think it's not mentioned that he has a camera. Everybody else basically mentions that they had, you know, that Zolotaryov had a camera. There were 5 cameras. But it's not on the, I don't think it's on the official, like, expedition inventory. So people have asked, why would Zolotaryov have a camera and not report it and all of that? And also, if they were all leaving the tent in a panic, why did he have the camera on him? Which suggested that before whatever happened, he already had the camera on him. If so, what was he expecting to see something? Was he just getting some shots of the night sky? What happened here? I think the camera is a good and a valid question. It's one of the threads I'm going to be pursuing in part 3. But, God, it's just all so strange. It is all so weird.
I mean, with the camera, it could be something, and then it could be absolutely nothing. It could be just a completely, we missed something. Oh, I forgot to include it in the manifest, or whatever. And I remember actually looking at the pictures, and you can see the camera on his chest. I think it still has a cover on it to protect it from the weather.
Yeah.
So I don't think he was actively using it at the time.
No, but he may have been
he was around his neck.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, what was he expecting to take a picture of out there? Which it may have been nothing. It may have just been that he was like, God, maybe there was a meteor shower expected or something. But
yeah, with the orange lights, I think when people hear that, some of the problem is that people will automatically go to UFOs instead of anything else. I mean, kind of what I thought. I thought of like flares or something, so you shoot those at night sometimes if you want to see what's on the, I mean, but that goes down this whole like rabbit hole of like, were they targeting these people?
And also no flare guns were found. So.
Well, I'm talking about like a mortar launch flare.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. In which case, why?
The bad guy. Right.
Who?
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see. So there was one other thing that I just saw that I wanted to address while we were still here, but what was it? I thought I saw something, but that's what it was. Somebody asked what was on the film, if they recovered it. They did recover the film from his camera, but the water had damaged it so much that they couldn't develop any of the pictures.
Oh yeah.
Allegedly. That is what the Russian government said. So, and then there was also some weirdness about rather than having one of the actual investigators develop the footage, the photographs, they had one of the students who knew these guys do it. Like this is why I said I need to do a third video on it, is because there's a lot of weirdness during the investigation, which on the one hand, like, and it's another one of those cases where you look at it and at face value, it's super weird, but also the details might totally explain it. And it might be a situation where it was like, there literally wasn't somebody in the office who was capable of developing the photos. So they went to the local Polytechnic University and said, who here knows how to do this? And grabbed somebody. That's possible. Weird, unlikely, but possible. So I need to dig in first and see, like, what are all the actual details?
Wasn't Zolotaryov the guy too that also supposedly was found with a notebook and pencil in his hands?
But nothing written.
But
yes.
That's not actually logged as evidence, right? Or was it?
It is noted, but it's not considered evidence of something because he didn't write anything. I think the captain said something like he grabbed the notebook and paper, flipped through the whole thing, and then yelled something about like, of course he didn't write anything down. Yeah, right. Like.
And I guess, well, I think that just, makes conspiracy theories about like, was this guy hiding something? Do we still have this notebook as proof that he didn't write anything? I don't know. You hear a lot of crazy theories about this stuff. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard one about, it might have been Zolotaryov who was actually there on behalf of like the KGB to take photographs of military guys doing something or other. It's an interesting rabbit hole to go down. I don't know if there's anything to back it up. But
so Zolotaryov had been in the military. His official record suggests that he never really found his footing and got bounced around to a lot of different units. It says he fought during the war, probably referencing World War II. But he did have a brother. This was one interesting one. He did have a brother who went missing during World War II, and it was believed he may have defected to join the Germans. But it's nobody knows for sure. He also may have just died and never been found. But yeah, one of the theories was that Zolotaryov never actually did leave the military and was doing work for the Russian government, but If so, what? Because these were college students. That's the other one that I think doesn't quite get like hammered down enough. These were college students. They were just going off for a recreational trip as far as any available documentation suggests. So I don't know. There's
like very minimal evidence you could say that perhaps certain people knew something was going on that the others didn't. The fact that some were more well clothed, than the other. The fact that Zolotaryov was carrying the camera at that time. It's like, why and what did they know or what were they doing?
Yeah, he also was added at the last minute. He was not supposed to be on that expedition, and then last second he was added on. The official explanation is, of course, that it was because it was a shorter trip that got him the same certification, and he needed that certification in order to be able to do something for his job. And he was a sports instructor, and one of the difficult things in researching this case is the remarkable cultural differences between Soviet Russia and modern America. I mean, you had to get permission from the government to go do a hiking trip, which in America is like, you really only need to tell your boss you're not going to be in for a week. In this case, they had to go through and be like, we're going here. We're bringing these things. These are the people who are coming. These are the stated goals of the expedition. Like, they had to submit all of this to the local Communist Party office and say, hey, here's what we're doing. It's a lot more complicated, but also if you were doing sports, you apparently, like, there was a whole process of certification that just does not exist in the United States because everything's private sector here. Over there was a lot more red tape, and it eventually becomes kind of confusing to, like, one interesting part about it is that Dyatlov had never submitted the route map, according to the story. You mean to tell me that the Communist Party, who diligently made sure that every single aspect of this trip was checked by like 2 or 3 different officials, did not notice that the route map was missing? I find it hard to believe. And that's why I think that whatever did happen here, I think the Russian government knew more than they're letting on. And that we're probably never going to find out what really happened there until somebody stumbles across the archives and is like, oh, well, in the personal belongings of Khrushchev, buried in a journal entry from 1963, he writes that this thing happened to the Dyatlov expedition and he decided to cover it up. Like, unless that happens, which, to be fair, that happens with incredible frequency in history. Like, that we just find something that we're like, oh, well, okay. That explains it.
Kind of like the Mount Wall tablet.
Yeah, that one. There was another thing we talked about in the... there's something that I think we talk about in this video that we're shooting tomorrow. Just every once in a while, somebody will come across something, and it's just a document from 400 years ago that is the total missing piece to explain a mystery. And we're like, oh, well, that's not nearly as cool as any of the theories that we had, but at least we have an answer now. One example was the Knights Templar. There was a document found in 2001 that proved that Pope Clement, because there was one document that existed that was Pope Clement absolving the Knights Templar of all of their heresies that they had confessed to under duress. In 2001, they found a second document confirming it, and were finally able to go, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like, that wasn't made up. That was a real thing that happened, and it was entirely because somebody found something that had been filed under the wrong date. It was it was from 1308, and it was filed under 1307 or something, so nobody knew to look for it. And just
surprisingly good way to hide things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hiding something in plain sight is a lot more effective than people think, and that's what I think, with a lot of these cases, and especially when you're looking at something weird that a government did in the last 100 years, often it's hidden in plain sight. But you know, all that out of the way, is there anything you wanted to bring up before we move to Q&A?
No, I think we covered that pretty good.
Me too.
You know, I can only give the way I'm leaning on this
Yeah.
one because there is just there's not enough certainty to make any certain statements.
Yeah.
You know, I lean towards some kind of concussive blast.
Mhm.
I'm not buying into the slab avalanche too much.
No.
That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Weirder than Avalanche, but not as weird as Yeti. Is where I am.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think that's kind of how I feel about it. But it is, of course, 9:05 p.m. So, Mr. Thornbussy,
I'm ready. Let's do it.
take us away.
Alfarius Omegon for $20 back at the beginning of the show said, "Lift for the Lord, a pagan worked out today. Have you?"
You know what? I have never been more motivated to go to the gym than knowing that the pagans are preparing for something. Perhaps we should too.
I'm feeling bad. I feel like I should have, hit the weights a little bit today. Enigma, did you happen to
you hit the
stumble
weights
into the weight room today?
Never on a Sunday.
Okay, you know what?
There we
I
go.
respect that.
There it is.
Thou shalt not lift on the Lord's day.
There we go.
Amen.
Amen.
We're safe. Ian Sharps for £5 says, "No Q, just thanks, and that missing Enigma is one handsome dude." So we
I appreciate that.
got some
Thank
fans
you.
in here.
Thank you.
There's a bit of back and forth between Agamemnon and Alfarius in here. Do we want to read that out or just let them have their convo?
Well, I mean, they did super chat it, and the rule is we read the super chat. So
Fair enough.
how about we wrap our way back to that at the end?
Sounds good. Mal Lahane is a new member this month. So thank you
Male
very much for
Lahane.
that. Male Lahane.
Yeah.
And then they're
Well,
doing
thank you.
and he also gave us $1. So
Thank
so
you.
much.
Is that an Irish name?
Lahane makes me think so.
Well, male is the one that's got me. Yeah.
Fair.
And if it is, what does it mean?
Yes.
Because I know male can mean slave or servant.
Cole24 for $5 says, "Michigan has reciprocity with Pennsylvania. The Dogman was seen in my area in the 50s. It could be a fun fan meetup. Michigan has lots of other native folklore and cryptids."
Didn't we just talk to Roanoke last week? We talked to Roanoke Tales
We did.
last week about he's doing a Michigan Dogman hunt in like 2027, I think he said.
Yeah,
And he said we were welcome to come along, so maybe we could get you in on it.
yeah. Just
Get-
get a whole
Get the
Yeah,
whole roll squad
I'm always
deep
down
into the
for a
woods with
cryptid hunt.
yeah, I think we bring out some
I feel like
30-06s.
the end result of my channel is eventually just going to be me out there looking for Bigfoot or something. You know, we'll see.
I think we're all gonna end
Yeah.
up there at some point.
Isn't that the goal?
That's
the
where we're all
dream.
heading.
Okay, but like I do think that maybe like A&E or one of those channels would jump at the idea of a TV show that's just a bunch of paranormal YouTubers looking for Bigfoot.
Well, if you got us all together in the same,
Yeah.
campsite and we're walking around, there's plenty of hilarity that
Oh,
we'll
God.
do.
YouTubers at a campsite hunting Bigfoot would be a great program. We could
Absolutely.
probably organize that ourselves and make more money doing it. We should talk.
Roll in on that.
Just get everybody together in like British Columbia for a week.
Yeah, let's go. We'll find the Saskets. It'll be great.
We gotta look for them in Washington. We're gonna
Washington,
need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
I'm not going Bigfoot hunting without the strap.
Mm.
Yeah, Sasquatch gets the gat.
Well, with Washington, we might have to get good with bows and arrows.
Mexico it is.
There we go.
They probably.
I mean,
roam that far east.
I'm in Washington. As long as you got all your guns before they banned them, which I did, you're good to go.
I mean, I did. I
There you
just
go.
didn't get them there.
Yeah. Mel Lahane back in for $2 saying, "Maybe Catabatic woke up the thing that attacked them."
That would be an interesting. I like that as an idea for a horror movie.
Yeah.
That's a good idea for a horror movie. That like the Dyatlov Pass group, it wasn't paranormal at first. It was a perfectly not paranormal night until it wasn't.
Cakes for $1.99 said, "Please remind me what the Lore Lodge email is again."
Oh, the lorelodge@gmail.com. Yeah. Or actually now we have redacted
Yeah.
as an entity, but that's more internal.
Yeah. That's more like overarching
Yeah.
kind of deal, yeah. Mandalorian Mama for $5 says, "The Lore Lodge and Missing Enigma is Chef's Kiss collab. We need a collab video shot on site somewhere."
Yes, that would be great, but We're kind of on opposite sides of the country.
We're gonna have
so-
to meet in the middle.
Yeah, if
probably.
you're ever in Pennsylvania or we're ever on the west, if you're ever on the East Coast or we're ever on the West Coast, we should talk about it.
Yeah.
No.
'Cause that would be
If
fun.
you're ever that's out this way, for sure.
Yeah, I
do
definitely.
is
I love the. It's been ages since I was anywhere remotely close to the Pacific Northwest, but I have friends who live out there, and it is beautiful, and I would love to see it. So, and someone currently hugging my leg would probably also love to go see it.
Amazing. Donnie McPhee for £1.99 for £1.99 specifically said Aiden is our favorite lovable nerd.
Thank you.
No, he's my lovable.
Fair. Briar Woods for $10 says my favorite case and 2 favorite creators. What a dream team! Thank you to you
Thank
both.
you. I'm glad you're such a big fan of Aiden and Enigma here.
Appreciate it.
Christian Ladd just gave us $5.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I do love a good Christian lad.
Not sure what Gomb is referring to here.
I'm sorry. I vaguely remember. I think it was when I asked, like if you have any idea, like any thoughts on what it was or whatever. Actually, no, because that was recent. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, he said, I'm sorry. It was my lesbian Wendussy bodyguards. Surprised that the
Appreciate the apology at least.
the Wendigos have. Okay,
Moving on.
they're not really a sexual being.
Not really, no. That's like probably one of the first
I think
instincts to go.
one of the first things I told people was don't try to
No.
make it with the Wendigo.
No.
And that seems to be all anyone wants to do.
Wise words.
Our
Exactly.
entire fan base needs a big bonk.
Yeah.
Straight to jail. Bro Cody for $10 says, I was a part of the search party that looked for Rowan Griffin in 2010 in New Hampshire. He was found dry in a swamp clinging to a tree. Weird incident that was featured in David Paulides' Missing 401 book.
So, Bro Cody, if you want to email us your experience with that, we would love to have it.
Yeah.
And we could look into the case ourselves too. It's been a while since we got to do a Missing 401 case.
Yeah.
So,
Seriously.
just because we kind of covered all of them.
Yeah.
We
Yeah, I
got
covered
through
that
all of
case
the-
back in the day. I
Yeah,
remember
that
that
did
one.
you really?
Stephen Rowan Griffin.
Yeah, I remember the
Found-
name.
Yeah. Found in a swamp clinging to a tree.
Was that the one where there were cows involved?
Not that I recall.
Maybe it was a nearby one. There were cows involved. But yeah, I remember researching a couple, and one there was like kid kept saying he saw cows,
Interesting.
but there were no cows to be found. Yeah.
Jody Hill for $2 says, forget R&R, I need A&A today. Well, you've got it.
Well, yeah.
Ori Clough for $19.99, thank you very much, says, my theory is that they certainly left the tent.
Your theory is correct. They did leave the tent.
They did, in fact, leave the tent. What happened after? That's why we're here. James Knapp for $5 says, supporting you and Missing Enigma collabs.
Thank you.
Thank you. K Android for $20 says, subscribe to both channels. You guys have the charisma and great research.
Thank you. I
love how you sat back with swagger.
Yeah.
Charisma, yes. I think so too.
Yes, quite.
Amazing. We need to get you a pipe.
No.
Can it be like a toy one that blows bubbles?
Yes, but it's
Okay.
going to be excessively large, like the one from Inglourious Basterds.
Can we get me a series of identical but slightly differently sized pipes so that I can like pick it up, put it down, and pick up a slightly larger one each time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they look exactly the same, so
I like
people
this
think
idea.
that like something's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mm.
David Blogeberg for $10 says, do you think the Russian government at the time had a negligent process to the investigation? In parentheses, do you think things could have potentially been overlooked or unobserved? My answer is absolutely yes. If you've watched the Chernobyl miniseries, that's a really good indicator of how much the Soviet government and everything that they ran at that time just simply didn't want to do anything.
I want you to take that entire thing and make a short out of it because the way you were staring at the camera was very funny. What about you?
Same. I mean, yeah, that government was so compartmentalized that, I mean, and I could see them not caring, you know, or they were involved and they hid it.
Yeah, it's one of the two. It is not a question of is it possible that they missed things or things went unobserved, unless this is a cover up. It is a 100% chance that something went unobserved purely because it was a government operation. A government operation has at best a 70% like you are getting 70% success
Maximum.
max. 100% is never on the table.
Because you know something was like organized improperly even from the start.
Exactly. It's like,
Well, actually, no, that's true considering what's his name? What was it? Zolotarev was supposed to be on another expedition, but then he randomly at the last minute got thrown into this.
got
one.
added onto this one. You know, it's something got overlooked for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure when I go into the documents that are more related to the investigation, and some of the weirdness that went on rather than the actual hard facts of what injuries they had and all that, I'll probably come across some more of that stuff. But oh my good lord,
Yeah.
just definitely we have not covered a single case of anything where the government was involved where they did a bang up job, especially law enforcement, FBI. We have at least one video that goes over the time that a federal organization of some country somewhere totally failed. We have Charles McCuller, which is the FBI screwing up.
Yep.
We have Amber Tuccaro, which is the RCMP screwing up, and we have Dyatlov Pass, which is the USSR Investigative Commission screwing up.
There was one video, and I remember it very innately, both editing it and watching the premiere, where you did a little rant, and you were like, yes, I know, shockingly enough, I'm giving credit to the feds for doing something right. And funnily enough, I have no idea what it was for.
It was recent.
Yeah.
It was recent.
I think it was a Missing 411.
I think it was. Very recent Missing 4. It was probably whatever our last Missing 411 video was.
Probably.
I don't remember what it was, though.
Yeah. Miss Maury for $5 says, glad to see Missing Enigma is back. Is your couple name Lore Enigma or Missing Lodge? This is critical to the fanfiction writers. Personally, I'm partial to Missing Lodge.
I like the Missing Lodge.
Not bad. I like it too.
I think that's your answer, Miss Maury.
The Lenigma.
That sounds too
The
close.
Ligma.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, there we
it
go.
sounds too close to that.
The Ligma Lodge.
Yep, there it is.
The Missing Ligma.
The Missing Linkma?
Yeah, the Missing Ligma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
James Ellison for $10 says, dumb question, but why not just set a tree on fire for warmth?
Well, it's hard to set a whole tree on fire.
Yes.
Those things
Yeah.
are less
Especially-
flammable than you think.
Yeah.
Especially in the snow like that.
There's so you know that triangle. I'm speaking to the audience now. You know the triangle of like.
Oh my god.
Fuel.
Here it is.
Wait.
Now we're the Illuminati.
Oh yeah.
Look what you did.
No, but the
Clip that.
triangle of fuel.
Clip it, chat.
We might as well. The triangle of fuel, oxygen, and heat. Well, if you just had a single standing tree and you tried to light it, you've got a lot of fuel and oxygen, but it's really hard to keep the heat concentrated around it, especially when you've got the level of winds that supposedly were happening up there. So even though it's getting a lot of oxygen and there's plenty of fuel, the heat's just dissipating way too much. That's why generally when you make a fire, you make a little ring or like a little pit, or you dig a little pit for it. So that way it helps to consolidate the heat in the area until you get it big enough. So that way the heat internally, especially with the coals, is helping to feed it along with the fuel and the oxygen.
God, you're hot when you talk about physics.
Isn't it so funny considering I'm a film person?
Yeah. Somebody in the chat did tell us where we gave the feds credit. It was our video on Sound of Freedom.
Oh.
Because the feds actually did their jobs.
Yeah, valid.
Like,
what else we got? Mad Grubel for $10 says, mildly off topic, but do you guys think you'll ever cover Jeff the Talking Mongoose? It makes me think of the Bell Witch. P.S. Lore Lodges, the tits. Love you guys. Amazing.
that is a comment.
He's
The
gotta be
what mongoose?
Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
Have you ever heard of that one?
Nope, that completely over my head.
Oh,
It's going on
now,
the sheet.
gotta look up what Jeff did. You did to read the next one.
Okay, Agamemnon's gym bag for $20.69. Nice. Said Christian Lads had a regular chat after it. Look for it. It was interesting.
After what?
All the way back after his
Oh, okay.
super chat.
Jeff the Talking Mongoose. Oh, it is spelled GEF.
Got it. Agamemnon, can you just like copy and paste it in the regular chat, just so that way I can see
Yeah,
it,
if you
not
could do
have
that,
to go all the way back to it.
Near the hamlet of Dalby on the Isle of Man. All right, so I guess I'm looking up Manx folklore.
Love that. Christian Lad, another $1. Love that. I assume that's pinging the other thing. MD for $2 says Wendigoon is going cryptid hunting with Critical.
It's so not fair.
No.
It's so not fair.
No.
It's so not fair.
They already stole the idea.
Yeah.
That was quick.
I mean, like, that's a great combo, though.
It is. It is a
It
great
is.
combo. It's not fair. I want to go cryptid hunting with Critical.
I gotta say, even though we're short kings, you know, I think Charlie's the same height as me.
It's going to be a very entertaining video to
Yeah,
watch.
so
Just the size
watching-
difference alone.
Yeah.
Also, Wendigoon just got married. I think yesterday. So.
Oh, nice. Congrats to the
hap-
lad.
2 days ago, I think. I think it was the 6th.
I knew it was soon. I didn't realize
Yeah.
it was in the past now.
Yeah. Would definitely explain why he's been
No, 100%. Yeah.
radio silent for a couple weeks.
Gives him a pretty solid reason.
Yeah. I knew it was soon. Oh,
Nice.
boy.
Love it. Melahane for $5 says it was originally male Dune,
Male twin.
but I was fighting in the SCA in Scranton, PA. It became Lahane to reference Faith from Buffy. Still Irish, more Boston.
Gotcha.
enough.
What is
Nice.
the SCA?
I'm not sure. Is it like a union?
Fighting the SCA in Scranton. Fighting in the SCA. What is the SCA? Now I'm going to look that up.
Christian Lad did just send what he was saying
Mm-hmm.
earlier. He said, I can make another try and make it short. From Nashville, grew up with tales of the Bell Witch. One was that some trapped the witch in a car engine 150 years later. I would love to know how that's possible.
Yeah. I mean, it would depend on what you mean by witch, which of course we're not talking. That was the other thing about the Bell Witch Project is I was going into it expecting, you know, like double toil and trouble witch. No. This is like demonic entity witch. It is Appalachian terminology. It is totally not what I thought it was. We're more talking about a demonic entity here. And that is how they perceived it. I wish they had said demon, but I realized that, you know what, maybe this terminology was not quite so uniform 150, 200 years ago.
I'd honestly be shocked if it was.
Yeah. Is that ever something you come across if you're like looking at an older case where you're like, oh, wait a second, my modern sensibilities got this wrong because I just didn't understand what they were talking about?
I mean, I find older cases in general, in terms of missing like people,
Mm-hmm.
they have just a lot more like lore, legend, myth
Yeah.
to them, and you know, and it makes it really hard to really kind of try and discern what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
because so much of that sometimes gets added on top, and you're not
Yeah.
sure what, you know, especially if you're relying on like one or two newspaper articles that were like ever written about something. I always find it fascinating though. I love that kind of stuff.
It's there were a couple of missing 401 cases that I had that issue with. I think Alfred Beelhart's was one. Some of the ones where it was
Is
like
that the kid who was snatched off the cliff supposedly?
Yes.
Someone saw him sitting
Yeah.
there and then yanked back.
yeah,
Yeah, I know that one. you're
which
talking-
like
yeah. Which I don't know if is there even a source for that, or is
don't-
that just missing 411?
I think the only source for that is David Politis.
I think so too. 'cause I remember
and
looking
local
that up.
legend.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if you go to Estes Park and ask about it, they people might know the story. But my feeling is that one's probably local legend, and maybe Alfred Beelhart's was a kid that went missing, but there was nowhere near enough evidence to do the normal style of video we do, where
Yeah.
it's like read the newspapers and see if anybody gave interviews. Like there was
Right.
nothing.
Gone for Ben Krajniak for $5 said, I want to clarify that it was my lesbian Windowsy bodyguards that attacked the group.
You know what? Understandable.
Yeah.
Why are they lesbians? How do you know that? Did you ask them? That is my question.
I hope you're not assuming their sexuality.
Yeah, that would be quite.
I don't even know what is a Wendusi.
Oh,
You want to explain that? I need to get there
made
first.
I made a TikTok video about Wendigos, and the first thing anybody wanted to do was do it. They're
Okay,
like,
got it.
all right, well, it must have one.
Oh, okay.
I think I might be responsible for the revival of the Yossi meme.
Unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Well played.
Is it?
It's not. It was a horrible play. I regret it. Every time I have to see the word Wendussi somewhere, the worst is when it's like an Instagram meme account posting a meme about it and they don't follow me.
Yeah.
They don't like know who I am. I'm like, I have created something that is now totally out of my control and there's nothing I can do about it.
How does that feel?
Not good. Sheesh.
Amazing.
I know how Joseph Smith feels.
Incredible.
I'm sorry to the Mormons in the audience. I had to.
Amazing.
No, really? I know how Great Britain feels.
Oh, jeez.
Poor Britain.
You could say that about
We
them
are
multiple
so
times over.
unbelievably sorry.
We just wanted to trade. We got a little bit too far ahead of ourselves.
The fur and tobacco were really quite exquisite.
We didn't realize colonization was bad at the time. We thought we were doing well.
You know what term we need to bring back as an insult?
What?
Dandy. We were watching Outlander last night, and the term dandy was used, and I was like, that's a good one.
What does it mean?
It was used to describe people, specifically men, who, I don't know what the best way to describe it is, but you think back to like 18th century France, and what you think of
like an effeminate man.
kind of, sort of like, but in a very 18th century sense.
So like a metrosexual aristocrat?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. There we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, just very exaggerated, pleasantries and accent,
So it's more about the class level.
Yeah, it was basically trying way too hard to appear aristocratic.
Oh, so like everyone on social media.
Yes,
Got
but yeah, it could mean also that rather effeminate, but that's not to be clear,
main
not the
thing,
way
yeah.
I was targeting more the the powdered wig and the painted face and the fake mole look.
Just reminds me of that Chowder episode. More powder.
Yeah, I'm gonna level with you here. I did not watch a single episode of Chowder in my entire life.
It's probably the reason you're the smarter one.
Norman really liked Chowder. I never got into Chowder.
At least I can relate with Norman on that.
Now, I am a big Chowder fan. Like actual
Yeah,
Chowder.
like edible chowder.
Love the stuff. New England, you did something right.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Lobster bisque as well.
Yeah, it almost makes me forgive you for every single time the Patriots cheated. Almost.
Yeah, you know what's so weird?
What?
For a team that consistently cheats and does pretty well, Bill Belichick is just still so angry.
Yeah,
all the
true.
time.
Well, no, I mean, have you been watching football this season? Bill Belichick is not a good coach.
No.
Tom Brady's a very good quarterback. Reversing everything I said as a kid. Tom Brady's an incredible quarterback. Oh my God.
Amazing. Distorted Games for $5 says, "Hey Lore Gang, for Aiden T, would you consider co-hosting videos sometimes? We crave more Thornberry screen time." Funny you say
Yeah,
that.
we actually just talked about that this week.
So we're planning on doing one this October. We're gonna cover. Are we gonna say?
Yeah. So this week's video is on Friday the 13th, the movie series, and obviously the superstition itself as well. And we're asking the question, what the heck is Jason Voorhees? Because clearly he's superhuman. The week after is going to be on the Blair Witch Project, which of course is kind of like, I don't know if it's necessarily the first found footage film, but it's the
one that
first
popularized
big
it.
found footage film.
Yeah.
So we're going to be covering that one as well, and he's going to be doing a segment on found footage cinematography and the history, and why and how the Blair Witch Project kind of catapulted that into what it is, and how you get from having basically nothing like that to having the Cloverfield paradox and all of these things.
Yeah, and just essentially it was like, what are the reasons you would use that in a film?
Mhm.
How is it effective? What's different about it compared to a regular, cinematography style film?
And we're
things like that.
we're working on a partial found footage movie as well.
Which one?
Asylum,
Oh yeah,
because it was going to be,
yeah.
because I was thinking throughout the movie we'll have them find
Yeah.
cameras and clips and stuff.
We've written
Yeah.
half of the outline. So
Yeah,
we're-
it's not super well put together.
Yeah.
But
But we're getting there. But yeah, to answer your question, there's that. Also, I've fiddled around for the last 2 years with the idea of doing maybe a monthly video about something, but I don't know what you guys would want to see from me. Would it be something film related? Would it be something just my random interest related? Let me know. I need motivation to do it because otherwise I'm not going to.
If you did one video a month, it would make my life so much easier.
Fair.
If you at least did the research for
Fair. Ludicolo for $5 says, I have come, so you should look into the disappearance of the giants and the dwarves in the Aztec mythology. That monster is crazy.
Okay, yeah, I can look into dwarves and giants in Aztec mythology.
Yeah, might as well.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on giants as a topic in general?
What, like the Nephilim or something?
Just in
What are we
general, the
talking about
idea
here?
that there were at some point giant humanoids or giant humans, you know.
I guess I'm kind of
what specifically they were varies, but like, you know, do you think there were big people?
I mean, hard to say. I'm kind of waiting for the bodies, I guess.
Okay, fair. That's a good point.
Well, there's the one from what we covered about a month ago.
Well, that's the thing. The Lovelock cave giant body appears to have been sold off to a private collector, and I could not find it. The Smithsonian did find a bunch of very large skeletons, and part of the problem is that the government does this silly, goofy thing where when they don't want people to ask questions about something, they hide it. Somehow they have yet to realize that causes people to ask more questions.
Oh, kind of like the whole Adam and Eve story with...
Yeah, with Chan Thomas and all that. Like, I don't know if you've read the Adam and Eve story, but it is a wild little book. It's about 55 pages. We have a video on it if you're interested. It's an hour and a half long, but sheesh.
Lots of tectonic geological shifting and
yeah,
all very interesting.
When you're aware that it was written in 1965, and then you look up, you know, how much we knew in 1965 about the stuff that we all learned in elementary and middle school, almost none of it. Apparently we found all of that out very recently. But yeah, back into mostly into the late 1950s, but even into the mid 1960s, they weren't totally sure what was causing extinctions in the past. Like, we got to remember here that the asteroid that knocked out the dinosaurs, I think that was proven in the 90s. It was theorized, I want to say, in the 70s, and I think they found the KT barrier that showed that there was a layer of ash at 65 million years in like 1994.
Wow.
I want to say.
Was that the meteor at the Yucatan?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, it's, that is one thing I wish that our teachers had taught us growing up, and maybe you feel the same about this, but like, I feel like they tell us a lot of stuff that we know now, but they did not give us a good account of when we found that stuff out and why that matters. Because, like, you look back at, you know, for example, Ignatius Donnelly. We talked about Tartaria, if you ever come across that theory. Don't. If you see the word Tartaria, run. You will be happier not knowing.
We had our own little crusade on that one.
Yeah.
We're speaking from experience.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
Ignatius Donnelly is the guy who wrote Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, which is kind of like the book on Atlantis that started it all. Back then, there was a whole bunch of stuff he couldn't have possibly known. Just straight up had not been discovered yet. Tectonic plates being one of them. Pangea. Most of what we know about Egypt before the Bronze Age, before the Bronze Age collapse. So if you understand that, you kind of can understand why his work reads the way it does, and it helps you get into the heads of people 150, 200, 300 years ago. But yeah, it's very weird to think about, and I've kind of been thinking about it a lot, partially because of, you know, I know I've referenced Outlander a lot recently because we've been watching through it, but it does make you realize, like, oh, you know, penicillin was invented in 1928.
Yeah.
Huh. Maybe things haven't been as good as long as we thought. Anyway.
Fair. Nick Rogers for $5.47 says there are literally dozens of Scadians hiding in chat.
What does that mean?
Somebody said it was like the Society of something anachronisms or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Miss Maury said for $2, 1,000 years from now, Windows C will be your legacy.
All right. Well, I better do something really evil then to knock that one off.
Why is that your instinct?
I don't know. It's a
Why
lot
do you
easier
go-
to be remembered for evil than it is to be remembered for good.
Why do you have to go full Lex Luthor?
If Wendussy was gonna be your legacy, would you not think of a way out of it?
You have so much writing talent.
I have no time. Evil takes far less energy. It's far less difficult to be evil.
Fair.
I am simply going to start blowing up random underwater pipelines without any regard for what they are.
You're a new character.
I will not be checking.
Wait, you're a new character archetype. Reluctant villain.
I like it.
I don't want to do this, but I have to because I need to be remembered for something else.
Yeah.
Which is ironic. Nob was back for $5 or gone. Am I saying that right? Gone?
Gomb.
Yeah.
You could just
$5.
call him Ben.
Yeah, it's true. I don't like taking the easy road out.
His name is right there, man.
I know. He says, I know they're lesbians because I asked. We communicate very well. Also, can I send them to Wendigoon as a wedding gift?
I wouldn't.
Yeah, he's pretty...
He's still mad at me for coining Wendigoosy.
He's also just very adamant, like, don't send him things in the mail.
That's true, yeah. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I don't know if he's changed his stance on that.
Probably
but
not.
Anytime I've ever been around him and the questions come up, he says, don't send me things for your own good.
Yeah.
Or, like, don't try and, like, find me for your own good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And I'll tell you this much. I've been very clear that don't try to find me for your own good. You are in so much more trouble if you find him. You're not going to be happy if you find me, but you're not going to be found if you find him. I don't have connections. My connections have connections, but I myself do not have the connections.
The 6 degrees of...
Do you have connections?
Rather not say.
That's the right
smart
answer.
Yeah, there we go. Nice. Miss Maury for $5 says, Thornbussy, I'd love to see a series from you on mythology and how it's used in film and what it got right and wrong from the source. I would be interested in that as well.
I mean, if you would like to start writing segments, I am happy to have you do them.
So the only thing that would give me pause is I would need to get from you good sources and resources. That way I can make sure the whatever research I'm doing is accurate.
Yeah, true.
So, I mean, as soon as we can lock that down.
Yeah, we just have to figure it out.
Yeah, and we can tie it into
yeah, we
movies
can
and
talk about
stuff. Yeah, for sure. Cass, that's just an addition that we are both her favorite Aiden.
Oh, thank you. Well, actually, it does. We were talking about doing a horror movie monster every month as a way to kind of give me a little bit of a break. So
do that.
We could do it that way, where it's like, since we're picking a movie monster, he can talk about, you know, the film aspect.
Yeah.
That would work.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be every week, but
yeah.
Big horror movie fan.
I you know what? I do appreciate them. I think it's an interesting genre of film.
It's my favorite.
It's got some of like the best variety in terms of quality.
What are your top 3?
Good question, yeah.
Oh man, I don't horror. You know, I've never actually thought about it.
Really?
You know, like I've never like I could do like my top 3 of all time maybe, but like top 3 horror. Ooh.
Well, what are your top 3 of all time?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Give you time to stall essentially and figure it out.
Okay, these 3 would more likely be in like a top 5 that are kind of all equal. But Conan the Barbarian, Ravenous, and The Fountain.
Interesting.
I actually have not seen Ravenous yet.
What would be your top 3 all time?
Ravenous is a horror movie, I think.
Yeah.
So
Really?
I would consider it a horror movie.
Yeah. So,
really
all right. Well, we got Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh god, here we go.
We got Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. We got Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. No, I think Return of the King is definitely up there as one of my favorites. I wouldn't say it's one of the best movies of all time, but it is one of my favorite. The first Conjuring movie is one of my favorite movies. And after that, Revenge of the Sith.
Nice.
I know 2 of those are I know all 3 of those are kind of basic, but like, you know, for me, my favorite movies are the ones that I can endlessly rewatch.
Yeah.
So for me, it's those ones.
Yeah.
You know, have you seen the Friday the 13th movies? Out of
Oh,
curiosity?
every single one.
What are your thoughts?
Like in general, I mean, it's like up and down with those. Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, I'm trying to. You know, number 4, if that's the one with the little kid,
Tommy.
Then the one that Tom Savini was a part of. And I was a big fan of that one. I think that might be like my favorite one of them.
I've watched
Yeah.
5 of them this week, multiple times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
I haven't seen them in a long time, but I
Yeah.
remember that one always being like in the top for me.
Did you see the 2009 remake with
Yes.
Jared Padalecki? What did you think of that one?
Good, not great.
Yeah, I thought it was a solid horror movie.
Yeah.
And I thought that compared to the original, it was definitely better. The first two,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
were
Oh, yeah.
extremely weak. But I think I haven't watched
I mean,
6 and 7 or 5, 6, and 7 yet. But I do feel like they get stronger over time.
Yeah.
So far.
Really? Well, wait till you get to Jason X.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
if
yeah,
you're
I
gonna-
will say
don't know if you're
after
gonna-
I was reading through some of the plot synopsis stuff and just of the series, not the individual movies, and I was like, okay, I can kind of follow how this is working. He seemed pretty dead at the end of 3, but all right, I can suspend my disbelief, and I get how they continued it after 4. You know, I
A
understand.
New Beginning, I was not a fan of.
But I get it. Like, I understand how they were rebooting the series. As I was getting to like the Jason after being, you know, dissolved alive by toxic waste, inexplicably returns in the future. Once I got there, I was like, okay, you've lost the plot. That seems a little much, but yeah, I can understand why they're kind of these cult classics. But watching
Freddy
the first
vs.
2 was
Jason's
rough.
a good one.
Is it
when you
it
get to
good?
That.
Yeah.
Surprisingly good.
Maybe next month we cover Nightmare on Elm Street, and then we can talk about both.
Fair
You know,
enough.
in terms of recent horror movies, I could give you 3 recent good
What are
ones I've
those?
seen. It Follows,
Good one.
and I'm talking like in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A Dark
Weird
Song,
concept, but good one.
and what was it called? The Night House.
The Night
Yeah.
House. Did you see Oculus?
Yes, that was very good.
I did not understand Oculus.
It messes with time a lot.
It messes with
I can
time
understand
so
that.
much.
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea what's going. It went from
But
I
in
don't know
terms of
what's
creep
going on
factor,
to I
it's
don't
pretty
know
good.
when's going on, and that was where I think that's where it broke for me. Like,
It'll definitely do that to you. Yeah.
maybe I should go back and rewatch it now that I'm about 10 years older.
But
Fair.
for a movie about a killer mirror,
Yeah,
that's,
exactly. Which I wish I could have been in the pitch room. It's just one dude's just like, it's a killer mirror. It seems like something the guys on Always Sunny would come up with.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
Like, genuinely. Caster for $5 says, AZ Superstition Mountains Headless Men Connection.
All right, we'll have to look into the Superstition Mountains. Do you know anything about that?
I know of them.
Okay, fair.
That's about it.
Isn't that funny though? Do you ever come across it where somebody like asks you a question about something very obscure and you're like, I
All the
wish I could
time.
tell you?
All the time.
I unfortunately have to respond to a lot of like super chats or Patreon questions with, oof, buddy, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel bad letting people down, but I'm not an encyclopedia.
Right.
Don't I wish? Joshua Cooley for $10 has an interesting question. Did the advancement of our scientific knowledge come at the cost of our ability to see a broader reality?
Okay, all right, let me read this one. Let me read this one. Did the advancement of our scientific knowledge come at the cost of our ability to see a broader reality? Did we have to narrow our vision to gain one kind of knowledge at the expense of another? It needed a more dramatic reading.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it just did. Yeah,
You spent so much
yeah,
time-
probably. I mean, fuck, man. That's actually something, you know, I don't know if you have any specific thoughts on it, but for me, this is something that I think of a lot when we're talking about Native Americans. That they lived a very different way from Europeans. And there's kind of been this push throughout history to obviously initially say, oh, well, they were less than us. They were behind. They were in, you know, they were not advanced, to even going so far as to call them savages. On the other hand, I think there's a push to kind of make it a little bit too sanitized. And there's this idea that like a lot of people think that the natives were kind of homogenous and peace loving and, you know, sharing corn with one another. And like there's this image that like, you know, they were hippies almost, and it's like, no, they had extensive trade networks, they had complicated religious beliefs, they had nation states, they had ties, like,
And that they were so vastly different that there were even some tribes that had remarkably similar religious structures to that of like Christianity.
Yeah,
some of the
there's
Abrahamic ones.
there were certain tribes that like almost sounded Jewish, not where tribes that would have encountered Christians would have been. So there's just this weird like, but yeah. So with that, and what I've kind of come to feel is that I think that technology and knowledge are different things, and I think that is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. Is look at it's not just the Americans and the Native Americans, it's the Romans and the Celts, it's the God, what's another good example of this? It is the God, what is a good example? Oh, the Russians and the Mansi. Like, just these different groups that have different beliefs, but the Native Americans lived a much cleaner lifestyle. They didn't have mass wars on the scale that we do. Was it better? Yeah, that might be up for subjective interpretation, but it was different. It was a different kind of knowledge. It was a different kind of world. And so, yeah, I think that, in some ways, I think we have lost certain things as the unceasing march of time brings us closer to whatever end we may find. But, yeah, I do think that the answer is yes. We have lost some of our cultural and I think, our knowledge of how to interact and care for one another as we've gained more and more scientific knowledge. So I think, yeah, emotional intelligence has decreased as we've gained, IQ. But what about you?
Yeah, no, I'll just say that I agree. That was a pretty good synopsis right there. No, I agree with what you said. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a natural evolution of things in a way, good or bad. But
Yeah. Mad Grubble for $2 says, "Have any of you seen Barbarian? It's on Hulu."
Yes.
I don't think I have.
I have not.
Is it a horror movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I'm not sure why it's called Barbarian. I will say that because
I mean,
I
I'm
didn't
not sure
see
why
any,
Friday the 13th
but-
was called Friday the 13th.
Fair enough. No, that was a good movie. I mean, it's worth a watch for sure.
All right, I'll give it a
Interesting
look.
idea.
Have you
One of the
seen-
better ones.
Have you seen Bone Tomahawk?
Yes.
That was one that I really liked that came out recently.
Kurt Russell, right?
Yeah.
Cowboy Kurt Russell.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Kurt
Yeah.
Russell back in the saddle, but he's fighting cannibal Native Americans.
You
had me
don't
at
get
Kurt Russell.
too many. Yeah, you don't get too many Western horror movies. So
No. Which is weird because it's actually a really good setting for a horror movie.
it's pretty good. Yeah.
There's so much you can do with it. You just got cowboys out on the trail. You can put them anywhere.
Yeah.
True. Agent Steve for $4.99 said, "Love your video on MMIW. Grew up in the Flathead Reservation in Montana, and a few of my friends are still missing."
The last sentence caught me off guard there.
Yeah. If you want to, Steve, send us an email with anything that you would want to let us know, even just some cases worth looking into, we would love to because we
Even if we can just post about them.
Yeah.
Like at the very least, we'd be like, hey, these people are still actively missing.
Yeah,
because we have reach.
We still very much, despite the lack of interest some people seem to have in MMIW,
Yeah.
we still very much have it. And we want to, cover it to the best of our ability. So
Yeah, I'd talk about it more if it weren't for the fact that a certain federal organization seems to be deliberately losing all of the files.
really,
Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm. It's just so great.
Actually, I did a video on Selena Not Afraid,
Mhm.
and I tried to contact the FBI for her files, and after a very long time, what they said to me was that we can't give you anything because she's still missing, and she had already been found dead a long time ago, years ago. So I sent them her obituary, and I said, "How can you think she's still missing when here's her obituary?" Their response was, "Oh, we're sorry. We'll look into that and we'll get back to you." And they gave me the estimated time that they would respond. It was 1,065 days.
So that was an automated response, basically.
No, I messaged them back and said, "This can't be real." And they said, "It is." So, yeah, that's your government. Yeah.
We'll be back in 2.5 years.
what you so proud to pay
Three-
taxes.
Yeah, almost 3 years. Oh,
Yeah.
but yeah, we tried to talk to the FBI about Tom Messick. And we didn't even ask that many questions. You want to know what my question was? Did you send agents? did FBI agents go to the scene? Was the only question I had asked them. And at first they were like, yeah, we'll have somebody get back to you. And then I called to check and I was like, hey, anybody get the chance to take a look at my question? And they went, yeah, we're just not going to answer it. They were like, and I was like, so no comment? And they said, we have no answer. And I was like, so you're not even saying no comment. You're saying you're not going to answer. They're like, yep. Okay. You know what? All right.
Did you
Cool.
did you ask why?
I did, and they just said no. This was a phone call that I had. I had a phone call with the FBI branch in Albany, New York, and that was how it went.
Fine people.
Yep. Huh.
Gotta love
All
it.
right. I think it's the last one.
It is.
Just so you know, the equal distance point from Georgia, Phoenixville, and I don't know where Bellingham is, but is Bray Road, Wisconsin. So I guess, is that you, the third one? Bellingham?
What? I mean, it's interesting because I did live in Bellingham for a number of years, but I do not live there now.
That was the place somebody gave. Maybe you mentioned it in a video at some point.
Never. I have never.
Yeah, but it does make sense
Weird.
that
Bizarre.
that the midpoint would be somewhere
Wisconsin.
around Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. And Bray Road does have the east of Bray Road. All right, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it would be fun now that there's kind of a solid community of YouTubers who are doing this general kind of thing, with a degree of like kind of academic level sincerity. Don't think it would be out of the question to get a bunch of people together at some point, at the very least for some sort of convention. But I think actually going and doing something together would be fun. But we can talk about it at a later date. I know it is getting late for us, and I'm sure you got places to be and things to do. So
Yeah, I got 8 minutes. I gotta go.
yeah, so thank you so much for being here. I will make sure you can scoot out of here. Do you want to give anybody who might not know who you are any places to follow you, or any final thoughts?
Yeah, follow me, Missing Enigma on YouTube. You can watch me there, and if you do like what you see there, you can check out my Patreon. There's actually 2 videos up on my Patreon right now that are quite long and no one has access to at the moment except patron members. You can also follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Missing Enigma. It's my name on everything. Thanks for having me on here, guys. I always appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was a great time. We loved having you, and I'm liking having guests again.
Oh, it's always
It's
fun.
nice to have people. Yeah, so I mean, next time we have something that you've got interest in, we'll definitely reach out and let you know. Maybe next time we have a good slew of missing 411 cases to talk about.
Cool.
All right. Well, we are gonna at this point switch over and get to the stream ending side of things. Let me do the outro really quick. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for all of the support, the viewership, the super chats. Definitely go follow the Missing Enigma. There have been several videos of his that really opened up my eyes on a missing 411 case. Great work, great coverage, and thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.